Welcome to episode 298 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. My special guest in this episode is Daniel Rueda, CEO of OpenPricer. We're going to talk about dynamic pricing or parcel pricing and how it can contribute to sustainable logistics. A really fascinating discussion. And Daniel's going to be appearing at Leaders in Logistics in London this week in March 2023. So if you are going to be there, make sure you grab Daniel after his presentation. So let's get into it now. Daniel Rueda, CEO at OpenPricer, talking about parcel pricing and how it can contribute to sustainable logistics. Joining me on the line is Daniel Rueda. Daniel is the CEO at OpenPricer. Daniel, we're going to talk about a really fascinating topic today. We're going to delve into this issue of parcel pricing and sustainability, which I think is a hugely interesting intersection of ideas, especially when there's so much debate right now about how sustainable is e-commerce and how can we reduce emissions in the last mile. Daniel, welcome. Well, why don't we just start with a very broad question. So can you explain the relation between pricing and sustainability?
Yes, we need to clarify this relation because perhaps it's not obvious for everybody. The first thing I want to tell about it is that there will be in a couple of days, early April, the first Pricing for the Planet summit in Paris. So this is a general summit also for many verticals. In terms of logistics, let me explain the relation. You know that all parcel carriers are investing in new technology to reduce emissions. They have some ambitious goals to reach zero emissions in the next 2 decades. And they are investing in new vehicles, electric vehicles for the last mile. Also, new technology for liners, and DB Schenker, for instance, has just tested the first hydrogen-powered 40 tons truck a couple of weeks ago. So these investments are massive, and they need to be financed, of course. And this is where pricing comes into play. So the question is, how can the cost of this effort be passed on to shippers, retailers, and ultimately to consumers?
And this issue of paying is a very sensitive one, isn't it? So do you think, or are consumers ready to pay?
I think the majority of customers are environmentally conscious, with some differences depending on the country. Of course, we have some differences in Nordic countries and Germany also on this group. Customers are more conscious than in other parts of the world. But there are some paradoxes. For example, in Germany, customers have a strong preference for home delivery, and lockers and parcel shops have not been a real success. Recently, the Escher Group published a study on decision factors for the choice of the delivery. And the first criteria is price, then comes speed, then convenience. So, of course, home delivery is a more convenient solution than out-of-home delivery. So out-of-home delivery can be done through lockers, pewter points, post offices. An interesting thing, post offices today are investing in new technology to be able to deliver parcels in their self-service kiosk 24/7. The fourth criteria is returns flexibility, and the last criteria is environmental friendly solution. German politicians and Dutch Post are calling for the introduction of compulsory CO2 labels on parcels. I'm a little bit skeptic about this measure because I don't know very well how it can help the customer to make the right choice. However, the idea is indeed to provide the consumer at decision time with a clear and simple indicator of the environmental performance of each delivery solution. Not a carbon footprint calculation, but a visual indicator, such as a green leaf, to highlight the best decisions and make the trade-off with other criteria like price, speed, convenience more easy for the customer. The most eco-friendly solution, for instance, a parcel shop or locker delivery, should be the less expensive to encourage switching to this solution. and the least eco-friendly shall support a premium representing like an eco-tax.
And this concept has been discussed before, but it's not something that's really in widespread use, is it, Daniel? So I suppose the logical question is, well, are there other ways to use pricing to change behaviours and lead to a reduction in emissions?
Yes, we discussed the behavior of the customer, but there are other ways to do it. Today, carriers are investing in new fleets of electrical vehicles, but it's not the only way to reduce emissions. We need to think about improving network efficiency, increasing fleet capacity utilization to have the same level of shipments with less trucks on the road. And this can also play an important role. For instance, increasing load factor from 70% to 85% would reduce emissions by 70.6%, which is a big figure. Dynamic pricing can play a key role. Just think about the way hotels, airlines, and railways use pricing to smooth peaks and fill empty capacity. So besides line haul capacity, this also applies to pickup capacity and delivered capacity that can be measured, for instance, in number of stops per hour.
And that figure there, Daniel, that you mentioned, was it's increasing the load factor from 70% to 85%. There's a reduction in emissions. And I imagine when you're looking at the business case for this, the business case is we're going to be more efficient, we'll be consuming less fuel, or we'll be putting less trucks on the road. So is that part of it?
Yes, when I was referring to going from 70% to 85%, I believe that 70% is like an average of load factor of the industry. However, load factor is never clearly measured by many carriers. I come from the airline industry. In the airline industry, measuring the load factor was an obsession. We had a daily report of the load factor on each flight. And I think a big change for carriers will be to start thinking about having these reports on a daily basis. So if you increase the capacity of vehicles, it means that you can carry the same bigger amount of parcels with the same level of vehicles. If I'm using more efficiently my network, I can avoid to add new capacity, and the performance of each parcel is better in terms of eco performance.
So I like that thing that you mentioned there, Daniel, about the obsession over load factor in the airline industry. And maybe that's something we need to be more like in the postal and delivery sector. We need to be more obsessed with load factor for a number of reasons, but maybe we shouldn't disappear down that rabbit hole right now. Well, let's continue with this discussion about, well, what you mentioned earlier about environmental performance indicators for shoppers. You mentioned, for example, a green leaf when people get to checkout. Can we also build these indicators for the shippers or the online retailers?
Yes, absolutely. We have built some KPIs to estimate, for instance, the peak share of a given shipper. Okay, so a peak share will be linked to the number of shipping activity that is doing when or where the network is saturated or close to saturation, and additional capacity is required. So another point is the predictability of traffic. We may have some customers which have a very seasonal pattern with big differences between day of week, but you can predict their pattern. And others that have a very erratic profile that you cannot really predict the traffic that you receive from them on a given day. And of course, it's easy to understand that this causes more pressure on operations that needs to adjust capacity on a daily basis, and at the end, more emissions, of course, because it's not predictable and you cannot optimize capacity utilization. So I think these KPIs are very useful in review meetings with large customers and when renegotiating price increases. More generally, I think the better collaboration between carriers and shippers will help to improve network efficiency and reduce emissions.
Now, we talked about the contribution of digital pricing to sustainable logistics. In return, what impact can sustainability requirements or sustainability demands, however you'd like to put it, have on pricing?
Today, the industry standard for pricing is the gross weight, so of the package or the shipment. However, the most important cost driver is not weight, but volume. So a nightmare for the environment would be a very big package and very light that will yield a very low revenue and at the same time generate a high cost for the company and for the environment. I think consequently, it's the right time to move to volumetric weight in domestic services, and why not to volume-based pricing? So I think it's a good time to invest in volume measurement devices to capture the real dimensions of the packages. Another idea is to use value of goods as a pricing factor above a certain threshold, because the willingness to pay of the consumer obviously depends on the value.
Now, when you're talking about volume-based pricing or volumetric and all those sorts of issues, I reckon there are a lot of postal operators and a lot of delivery companies that are thinking right now, we need to talk. And by the way, everybody, Daniel is going to be at the Leaders in Logistics event in London at the end of March. So if you want to meet Daniel in person, get yourself to the Leaders in Logistics event, but we'll share the contact details for OpenPricer in a moment. But as I was just saying though, Daniel, this is a super hot issue, especially for your postal operators who have to take everything, whether it's from a over the counter at a post office, from a C2C parcel, or an e-commerce retailer that might be injecting tens of thousands of parcels into the system every day. So can you just share a bit about what OpenPricer does and what OpenPricer can offer to carriers?
So what we offer primarily is a cloud pricing platform that is used by sales teams of carriers to acquire new business at best possible contribution margin. And this platform can also help to improve network efficiency and contribute to reach sustainability objectives on time. For instance, we are currently working on different projects to differentiate prices by origin, destination, and shipping date. It's what we call dynamic pricing calendars to optimize network capacity utilization.
If people want to find out more about OpenPricer and the services that you offer, how should they get in contact?
So if you want to know more about our services and what we can provide to you, please visit our website at www.openpricer.com.
So go to openpricer.com. I will stick a link to the openpricer.com website on the Postal Hub website. So if you're listening to this episode via the website, just scroll down and you'll see a logo or a link to the OpenPricer website, and you can click on that and go through to the OpenPricer website and find out more about, well, everything we've discussed in this episode to do with, obsession over obsession over the load factor through to sustainability via parcel pricing. And we talk about dynamic parcel pricing as well in a previous episode of the podcast. So go through, talk to Daniel or somebody from the team about what they can do for you. Daniel Rueda, CEO at OpenPricer, thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Thank you, Ian.
Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, Anne Snitko returns from Omnic to talk about parcel lockers. I've got the USPS Inspector General, Tammy Whitcomb-Hull. She's joining us for a chat. And Paul Boyce from the University of Groningen is going to join me to talk about, well, I can't tell you, because it's top secret, and you'll have to tune in to find out. And how do you do all that? Well, of course, you can subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc., etc., etc. You can subscribe to the email newsletter, which I send out every time there's a new episode. Go to thepostalhub.com and sign up there. And while you're over there, make sure you sign up for the Daily Delivery Digest and sign up for Decarbonising Delivery. These are some, I'm going to say they're great. Of course I'm going to say they're great because I'm behind them. Ways to make your inbox even nicer. Anyway, enough of this chit chat. You all know what I'm going to say next. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can email me at ian@thepostalhub.com. And I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I'll catch you next time on the Postal Hub podcast.